Americans, Chapter 23, The New Deal. The Impact of the New Deal. George Dobbin, a 67-year-old cotton mill worker, staunchly supported Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal policies. In an interview for a book entitled These Are Our Lives, compiled by the Federal Writers Project, Dobbin explained his feelings about the president. Quote, I do think that Roosevelt is the biggest-hearted man we ever had in the White House. It's the first time in my recollection that a president ever got up and said, I'm interested in and aim to do something for the working man. Just knowing that, for once, there was a man to stand up and speak for him, a man that could make what he felt so plain nobody could doubt he meant it, has made a lot of us feel a sight or a lot better than even when there wasn't much to eat in our homes, end quote. FDR was extremely popular among working-class Americans. Far more important than his personal popularity, however, was the impact of the policies he initiated. Even today, reforms begun under the New Deal continue to influence American politics and society. During the second term in office, President Roosevelt hinted at plans to launch a third New Deal. In his inaugural address, the president exclaimed, quote, I see millions of families trying to live on income so meager that the pall of family disaster hangs over them day by day. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished. End quote, end quote. However, FDR did not favor deficit spending. More importantly, by 1937, the economy had improved enough to convince many Americans that the Depression was finally ending. Although economic trouble still plagued the nation, President Roosevelt faced rising pressure from Congress to scale back New Deal programs, which he did. As a result, industrial production dropped again, and the number of unemployed increased from 7.7 million in 1937 to 10.4 million in 1938. By 1939, the New Deal was effectively over, and Roosevelt was increasingly concerned with events in Europe, particularly Hitler's rise to power in Germany. Over time, opinions about the New Deal have ranged from harsh criticism to high praise. Most conservatives think President Roosevelt's policies made the federal government too large and too powerful. They believe that the government stifled free enterprise and individual initiative. Liberal critics, in contrast, argue that President Roosevelt didn't do enough to socialize the economy and to eliminate social and economic inequalities. Supporters of the New Deal contend, however, that the president struck a reasonable balance between two extremes, unregulated capitalism and overregulated socialism, and helped the country recover from its economic difficulties. One of Roosevelt's top advisors made this assessment of the president's goal. This is from Rexford Tugwell. Quote, he had in mind a comprehensive welfare concept infused with a stiff tincture of morality. He wanted all Americans to grow up healthy and vigorous and to be practically educated. He wanted businessmen to work within a set of understood rules. Beyond that, he wanted people free to vote, to worship, to behave as they wished so long as a moral code was respected. And he wanted officials to behave as though office were a public trust. The Roosevelt administration expanded the power of the federal government, giving it, and particularly the president, a more active role in shaping the economy. It did this by infusing the nation's economy with millions of dollars, by creating federal jobs, by attempting to regulate supply and demand, and by increasing the government's active participation in settling labor and management disputes. The federal government also established agencies such as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to regulate banking and investment activities. Although the New Deal did not end the Great Depression, it did help reduce the suffering of thousands of men, women, and children by providing them with jobs, food, and money. It also gave people hope and helped them to regain a sense of dignity. The federal government had to go deeply into debt to provide jobs and aid to the American people. The federal deficit increased to $2 billion in fiscal year 1934. As a result of the in federal spending made in 1937 through 38, the deficit dropped to $100 million, but the next year it rose again to $2.9 billion. What really ended the Depression, however, was the massive amount of spending by the federal government for guns, tanks, ships, airplanes, and all other equipment and supplies the country needed for the World War II effort. During the war, the deficit reached a high of about $54.5 billion in 1943. One of the areas in which the New Deal policies have had a lasting effect is the protection of workers' rights. New Deal legislation, such as the Wagner Act and the Fair Labor Standards, set standards for wages and hours, banned child labor, and ensured the rights of workers to organize and to bargain collectively with employers. Today, the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, created under the Wagner Act, continues to act as a mediator in labor disputes between unions and employers. New Deal programs established new policies in the area of banking and finance. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, created in 1934, continues to monitor the stock market and enforce laws regarding the sale of stocks and bonds. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, created by the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, has shored up the banking system by reassuring individual depositors that their savings are protected against loss in the event of a bank failure. Today, individual accounts in United States federal banks are insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation for up to $250,000. New Deal economic and financial reforms, including the creation of the FDIC, the SEC, and Social Security, have helped to stabilize the nation's finances and economy. Although the nation still experiences economic downturns known as recessions, people's savings are insured and they can receive unemployment compensation if they lose their jobs. One of the most important legacies of the New Deal has been that the federal government has assumed some responsibility for the social welfare of its citizens. Under President Roosevelt, the government undertook the creation of a social security system that would help a large number of needy Americans receive some assistance. The Social Security Act provides an old age insurance program, an unemployment compensation system, and an aid to the disabled and families with dependent children. It has had a major impact on the lives of millions of Americans since its founding in 1935. New Deal policy has also had a significant impact on the nation's agriculture. New Deal farm legislation set quotas on the production of crops such as wheat to control surpluses. Under the Second Agricultural Adjustment Act, passed in 1938, loans were made to farmers by the Commodity Credit Corporation. The value of a loan was determined by the amount of a farmer's surplus crops and the parity price, a price intended to keep farmers' income steady. Establishing agricultural price supports set a precedent of federal aid to farmers that continues into the 2000s. Other government programs, such as rural electrification, help to improve conditions in rural America. Americans also continue to benefit from New Deal efforts to protect the environment. President Roosevelt was highly committed to conservation and promoted policies designed to protect the nation's natural resources. The Civilian Conservation Corps planted trees, created hiking trails, and built fire lookout towers. The Soil Conservation Service taught farmers how to conserve the soil through contour plowing, terracing, and crop rotation. Congress also passed the Taylor Grazing Act in 1934 to help reduce grazing on public lands. Such grazing had contributed to the erosion that brought about the dust storms of the 1930s. The Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, harnessed water power to generate electricity and to help prevent disastrous floods in the Tennessee Valley. The government also added to the national park system in the 1930s, established new wildlife refuges, and set aside large wilderness areas. On the other hand, government-sponsored strip mining and coal burning caused air, land, and water pollution. The New Deal legacy has many dimensions. It brought hope and gratitude from some people for the benefits and protection they received. It also brought anger and criticism from those who believed that it took more of their money in taxes and curtailed their freedom through increased government regulations. The deficit spending necessary to fund the New Deal programs grew immensely as the nation entered World War II. Additional information on the Tennessee Valley Authority. The Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, is a federal agency that was established in 1933 to construct dams and power plants along the Tennessee River and its tributaries. The Tennessee River Basin is one of the largest river basins in the United States, and the people who live in this area have a number of common concerns. The TVA has helped the region in various ways through flood and navigation control, the conservation of natural resources, and the generation of electric power, as well as through agricultural and industrial development. The Tennessee Valley covers parts of 7 states, thus the TVA became an enormous undertaking, eventually comprising dozens of major dams, each with associated power plants, recreational facilities, and navigation aids.